pan-searing steak. This is a very simple lesson, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you should know before you start to pan-sear. One is the meat itself. Choose meat from the middle loin, and this is a beautiful, beautiful steak. It's called a strip steak. Has no bone, has a little bit of fat right here on both these pieces. I'm just going to leave it. It's a nice thing to throw to the dogs after the meal. Make sure the meat is room temperature. Bring it out of the refrigerator about an hour before you're going to cook. And dry the meat very well with paper toweling before you start to cook. The pan itself. This is a well-seasoned cast iron pan, really hot, and you just throw a drop of water like that. That's what you want. Sizzling hot, not smoking. Okay, about a tablespoon of butter for each steak. We're doing 2. And basically it's going to take 4 minutes per side. Okay, now season with salt and pepper. And the reason that you dry the meat is because we do not want to steam the meat. We want to sear it. So any moisture will tend to collect underneath the meat and cause steam. And I'm using a generous amount of salt and pepper. Not too much, but just enough. And that little bit of butter really helps the caramelization of the surface of the meat. Don't ever season the meat before you're ready to put it in the pan. That will cause the juices to leach, and you don't want that. You don't want any oozing juices. These are inch-thick steaks, by the way. I always find it very amusing, you know, how at the grill when the guys are pressing down on the meat with the spatula. That's why use tongs instead. Don't go pressing down on the meat. It doesn't need to be pressed. 4 minutes, then it will be ready to turn. The reason I'm using cast iron is because they heat evenly very, very well. You can use a nice thick-bottomed stainless steel pan too. It works, but this works better. And another thing that really helps you cook the perfect steak is an instant read meat thermometer. If you insert it into the middle of that cut of steak, 115 to 120 for rare, 125 for medium rare, and 135 to 140 for medium. I think it is time to turn the steak. Look at that perfect color. You see, I didn't move it, and look at the great color that we achieved. It's tempting to move, tempting to poke, press, whatever, but don't bother. Time is up. And I'm going to test the internal temperature, which is 125. It's done. That looks very good. So let them rest for a few minutes. Now we'll make a little bit of sauce from the pan drippings, 1/4 cup of vermouth, and cook until the liquid is almost reduced. Takes about 40 seconds or so. Have to stand back so I don't get splattered. 1/4 cup of heavy cream and a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And add your heavy cream. Oh, does that smell really good? The sauce looks very good. The steaks have rested. You can serve this with a baked potato, sauteed spinach, broccoli rabe. I love steak with some green vegetable. And I have some fresh asparagus right from the garden to serve with these. So you have a dinner in approximately 10 minutes. I think I could sit down and eat that right now. And now just a little bit of this delectable sauce. And I'm just going to put it off to the side here like that. And here you have a gorgeous steak dinner. Your family's going to think they went to the very best steak restaurant. In the early 19th century, porterhouses provided a place for coaches to stop so travelers could dine. At one such establishment in New York City, a special cut of steak was served that later became known as a porterhouse, offering the best of both worlds. This cut has the flavorful strip steak on one side and the tenderloin on the other. You can see it right here. This is the tenderloin and this is the strip, but the bone is intact. We're going to serve this steak with a compound butter, and we're using a half a pound or 2 sticks of room temperature unsalted butter. And to that butter, we're adding about 2 teaspoons of chopped chives. Just add those right in. I love how that looks. And about a tablespoon of parsley and about 2 teaspoons of thyme. And you stir this up. I always put a little bit of pepper in my butter and a little bit of salt. By using unsalted butter, you control the saltiness. Now, this can be made way in advance and put right in the freezer. This butter is delectable, melted into the cooked meat. And form this into a cylinder in the parchment. Roll it up. As it gets cold, it'll hold its shape. And then you can twist the ends and tie them. Put this in a plastic bag, and it can sit in the freezer for a few weeks. So now the steak itself. A porterhouse is the same cut as a T-bone, but from farther back on the animal so that it contains more tenderloin, this part right here. And this is a gorgeous piece of meat. I love this steak, and it's very well marbled. Rub the outside with salt and pepper, both sides. Have your cast iron searing skillet heating right beside you. Dry the meat well with a paper towel if you find it moist. This is pretty well dried, so it will not brown as nicely or sear as nicely if you try to cook it wet. So this is basically ready to go. If you hear a great sizzle, you know that you're caramelizing the outside of the steak. Yes, perfect. The reason for the high heat under this pan is to make a crust on the outside of the meat. Now, if the meat were not as well marbled as it is, I would have added a little bit of oil to the pan just to prevent any sticking. Searing really does help adhere the seasonings, the salt and pepper, to the meat. 4 minutes per side. Be sure to wait until the steaks release easily from the pan before turning the steaks. Now that is a really good sear. And this is where the cast iron skillet really comes in handy. It is doing its job. Make sure your oven, by the way, is preheated to 425 degrees. This steak is going to go right into the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes. For medium rare, remove the steak from the oven when it reaches 120 degrees, since the internal temperature of the steak will rise about 7 to 10 degrees after you've taken it out of the oven. So be very careful. It's been 12 minutes. The steak looks incredible. Don't you think? Now it's important to remove the steak from the pan onto a cutting board like this. And it has to rest for about 10 minutes. Resting the steak equalizes the internal temperature of the meat, and the juices are reabsorbed into the meat, not in this little moat around the board. So 10 minutes, don't rush it. So 1 2-pound porterhouse will yield quite a bit of meat. I would say that this steak would serve generously 3 people. Cut the meat across the grain. So utterly beautiful. And this meat can be arrayed on the platter. And this is the tenderloin. You can put some beautiful vegetables on this platter, or you can serve the meat as is. But this is the compound butter. That is a really great looking porterhouse steak. All you need is a really good glass of your favorite Cabernet, and you have an unforgettable meal. Enjoy. The first thing we have to do is make sure that it is trimmed correctly. The butcher can do this for you, but a trimmed tenderloin, I find, costs a lot more than an untrimmed. It's easy. You unwrap it and cut out these big pieces of fat. Try not to remove any of the meat. Just carefully take off the fat and any of this sinew that you'll find. And then the ingredients, well, it is a tenderloin, and it weighs about 4 to 5 pounds when trimmed and tied. Green peppercorns, which add a very interesting flavor to the meat. Salt, olive oil. That's it. The equipment you need is a pan large enough in which to brown it, and a tray with a rack large enough to roast it, and the oven, 475 degrees. I'm going to show you how to roast this piece right now. So now the fat has been removed from our beautiful tenderloin of beef. We want to remove this long chain. This can be cooked up as little minute steaks. It can be ground for just a wonderful hamburger. But this is attached way up to about here on the tenderloin. Just trim it off. What we're trying to do is make as even a tenderloin as possible. Now this little tail can be tied right here. Once tied, it's all going to look pretty much uniform. And tying is a little bit of a process. Take your string, this is cotton twine, butcher's string, and tie a knot right here. Be firm. And then you take it over your hand like this, and over the meat, and separate it, about every inch or so. You see what I'm doing? It's fun to do this. Pull it tautly, see? And then do that again. Butchers do this so quickly. 1, 2, 3, and the whole thing is tied up. I learned a lot of it from my great uncle, Vutchy Joe, in Jersey City, New Jersey, where Vutchy Joe had a prime butcher shop. And so this is how you do it. Isn't that nice and neat? And then take your string and go underneath each one of these. And remember to bring the meat to room temperature before you start to cook it. That way you're assured that the inside will cook at the same time as the outside. So here we have the meat, and now what to put on the meat. The green peppercorns, about 1 tablespoon, just kind of crush in a mortar and pestle. They come packed in brine, so they're a little moist, but easily crushed. They have a nice fruity flavor and pungent flavor, which is nice on the fillet. And now rub with olive oil all over. This is very important because we're going to brown this on a griddle pan. And it won't stick if you have the olive oil on it. And now the salt. Sprinkle the meat with, at least a tablespoon of salt all over. This really does help flavor the meat and prepares it for roasting. And then the green peppercorns. Again, rub those in. They're not going to stick as easily, but you'll have these rubbing the wonderful crushed flavor into the meat itself. Now put this on the heated griddle pan. It's going to splutter and splatter. And being dry will really help sear the meat instead of steaming the meat. Looks good. And let it just stay there. Don't be impatient. It's going to take about 3 minutes per side to brown it correctly. And this is a very clever way to do it on the griddle pan because most people do not have a pan in which this will fit, including me. Oh, you will see how nicely this meat is getting a gorgeous color. Now the meat tells you when it's ready to be turned. If you try to turn it and it's still sticking, do not try to turn it. It comes right off the griddle when it is ready, that brown, beautiful, almost caramelized surface on the meat. Oh, lovely. And this is the pan that I have prepared for it to go into the oven. This is an oven rack, and this is just a cookie sheet. It's perfect for this because the air circulation under the rack will allow the meat to cook more evenly. and roast the meat in a conventional oven at 475 degrees, preheated of course. And if you have a convection oven, which is the best way to cook a piece of meat like this, reduce the temperature to 450 degrees. I think it's ready to turn. I'm trying to brown the meat really nicely on all sides. We've browned the meat enough. Turn off the griddle pan and remove the meat immediately to the rack. Looks good. Right into the oven. It's going to take anywhere from 15 minutes to maybe 20, 25 minutes to cook the meat to a temperature, internal temperature of 125 degrees. You don't want to overcook it, and it will continue to cook once it's removed from the oven. I have a couple green peppercorns I'm just going to put on top and into the oven. Now, this is what a finished fillet looks like. It's been resting here on the board for 10 minutes. Remove all the string, and I find it just snipping each string really is the easiest way to get rid of it. It smells good, it looks good, and I'm sure it tastes good. So here, just remove every last vestige of string. You don't want to be feeding anybody any string. Oh, and I don't know if I told you, when you buy the meat, make sure that the meat is soft. If it's too hard to the touch, it might mean that it is full of fat on the inside, and you don't want that. And now for slicing, with a very sharp knife, slice into beautiful pieces, about 1/4 of an inch thick. Now that is a beautiful fillet. Weighing in at around 2.5 pounds and several inches thick. A cowboy steak like this, well, it will certainly make a statement when brought to the table. Cut from the bone-in ribeye with a single bone left attached. It's thick and perfectly marbled, and because it's a relatively expensive cut of meat, you'll want to make sure you cook it perfectly. Let me show you how. So make sure, first off, that once you've trimmed any excess fat from this beautiful piece of meat, you dry it with a paper towel, rub it all over with just a little bit of safflower oil. Just a tiny drizzle here and there, but coating the meat. And have your griddle pan really hot. Now a sprinkling of coarse salt, rubbed in with some freshly ground black pepper on both sides of the meat, and rub a little bit around the outside too. And if you don't want this pretty bone to burn, just wrap it in a piece of aluminum foil. This will keep from burning. So, ready to start cooking. Place it one side down in your hot griddle pan. The bone like this is called Frenched because you've taken all the meat off the bone and left it exposed. One of the most common mistakes home cooks make is undersalting meat like this. You're only seasoning the surface of the steak, which means there's a significant portion of the meat that has no salt on it at all the interior meat. You want to make sure there's enough salt on the surface to perfectly season each bite. And safflower oil that I rub on the meat is a good oil to use because it has this high smoke point. It's flavorless, colorless, and it's expressed from the seed of the safflower. Now, I'm not going to move this for 2.5 minutes, so while it's cooking, I want to tell you that rib cuts are known for being fine-grained with generous marbling throughout, and it is one of the most tender beef cuts, and is a favorite for grilling as the bone-in keeps the meat extra moist and flavorful. This deep marbling gives the steak a slightly higher fat content than other cuts, making it extremely juicy. So now we're going to turn the meat at 2.5 minutes so that we get a really nice crisscross marking on it. And now another 2.5 minutes. A grill pan like this is a practical and convenient indoor alternative to a gas or charcoal grill. Although you won't get that same charring and you won't get that flavoring from the wood or charcoal fire. But those ridges are really good because they allow the fat to drip off the meat. And your oven must be preheated to 425 degrees because this meat's going to go in for 12 to 15 minutes after it is browned like this. How does it look? Really professional. I love that crisscross. If you were cooking this outdoors, use the direct heat to do the first 10 minutes. That's the direct heat. And then move it to indirect heat to finish the cooking, just like putting it into the oven. So 2.5 minutes, we turn again. So there we are ready, the second 2.5 minutes on this side. Now transfer the meat to a rack in a shallow pan like this. Another secret of good steak making is there's always air around the meat. Now this goes right into your 425 degree preheated oven, 12 to 14 minutes. It has to reach 125 degrees in the middle of the interior for medium rare. So now I've had the steak tented for 10 minutes. It's rested and it is ready to eat. Remove the foil around the Frenched bone, and you can move the steak now to a cutting board. This steak has to rest for 10 minutes just so that all the juices redistribute throughout the meat. If you cut it right away, a lot of those juices will just pour right out. So I think shoestring fries, a sharp knife and fork. If you have a big cowboy in your house, this will do for his dinner, but I think it would serve too very nicely. And this may be the best steak you'll ever eat. Enjoy.